Something about today refuses to let you keep looking away, and if you have sensed an unfamiliar pull inside yourself, do not dismiss it as imagination, because what is unfolding overhead is far greater than an ordinary astrological moment. I want to be completely honest with you from the very beginning, because I believe the alignment taking shape on July 25th stands among the most extraordinary cosmic milestones that many of us will ever experience in our lifetime. That is not an exaggeration meant to create excitement. It is the natural conclusion that comes from understanding the immense rhythm of the planets and recognizing what has finally reached its moment of exact activation. Today, Neptune and Pluto form an exact sextile for the very first time within an entirely new chapter of their shared evolutionary cycle. At first glance, that may sound like another entry on an astrology calendar, another transit that comes and goes without leaving much behind. Yet nothing about this alignment belongs in that category. Neptune and Pluto require 493 years to travel through one complete cycle together. Nearly 5 centuries pass before they return to the same beginning. The last time such a cycle emerged, humanity was standing at the threshold of the Renaissance, a period that transformed civilization in ways people living through it could hardly comprehend. Pause with that realization for a moment, because it changes the scale of everything we are discussing. You are not witnessing a routine celestial event. You are standing inside a doorway that appears only a handful of times across many generations. That realization alone has kept returning to my mind because I cannot ignore what seems to be unfolding beneath the surface. I believe this portal is illuminating 3 deeply hidden dimensions of your destiny, 3 pieces of your life journey that may have remained concealed for years, quietly shaping your choices from the background without your conscious awareness. Those hidden truths are beginning to move out of the shadows and into unmistakable clarity, and together we are going to explore each one. Before we reach them, though, I want you to notice something about your own recent experience. Perhaps you've been carrying an unusual feeling that words cannot fully describe, as though you are standing on the edge of a life that has not revealed itself yet. You know something is changing, but you cannot identify its name. It feels as though the foundation beneath everything familiar has begun to shift while the replacement has not fully appeared. That uncertainty can create anxiety because the human mind naturally wants certainty before it allows itself to trust transformation. Yet there is a precise reason that sensation has been growing stronger. And I believe that before this conversation reaches its conclusion, that feeling will finally make sense in a way it has not before. None of this began today. The energy has been gathering momentum throughout the entire month, quietly assembling itself like pieces of an enormous structure that only becomes recognizable when the final element arrives. To understand why July of 2026 feels so different, you have to step back and look beyond individual daily transits. This month has carried an unmistakable atmosphere, and if you have sensed that reality itself feels unusually fluid, your intuition has been responding accurately. Across the sky, 3 of the slowest and most influential planets in our solar system, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, have each been approaching the 4th degree of their respective signs. Uranus has arrived at 4 degrees of Gemini. Neptune has reached 4 degrees of Aries. Pluto has settled at 4 degrees of Aquarius. As each planet entered those positions, they formed an exceptionally rare geometric arrangement known as a minor grand trine, composed of 1 trine and 2 sextiles that together create a balanced triangle through which energy flows with remarkable coherence. Most people, understandably, never spend time thinking about planetary geometry because it feels distant from everyday life. Yet this pattern deserves your attention because of what it represents energetically. The exact sextile formed between Neptune and Pluto, today at 1:48 a.m., universal time serves as the central locking point for the entire configuration. It is the connection that secures every other part of the structure, allowing the full pattern to become active instead of remaining incomplete. Even more fascinating is the fact that this arrangement belongs within an even larger celestial configuration that astrologers have observed and studied for decades, a formation known as Barboat's basket. Others refer to it as the cosmic cradle, and that image captures its purpose remarkably well. At this very moment, Jupiter in Leo stands directly opposite Pluto in Aquarius. That opposition by itself creates tremendous pressure. It amplifies conflict surrounding power, exposes ideological divisions, and intensifies the struggle between personal ambition and collective responsibility. Left unsupported, such tension could easily produce instability and fragmentation. Yet the cradle formation changes the expression of that force. Uranus and Neptune function like cosmic supports surrounding the opposition, directing its intensity into constructive development rather than destructive collapse. Instead of allowing overwhelming pressure to scatter everything apart, this architecture channels it toward meaningful creation. Suddenly, the emotional weight many people have carried throughout this month begins to look different. That persistent feeling that one chapter of your life has been quietly dismantling itself while another has struggled to emerge may not be evidence of disorder at all. It may be the unmistakable signature of a larger design unfolding exactly as intended. What feels like uncertainty could actually be careful construction taking place beneath the visible surface. The universe is not randomly removing pieces from your life. It is assembling something whose final supporting element arrives today, allowing the entire structure to stabilize in ways that were impossible before this exact moment. This is why reducing today's alignment to another ordinary transit completely misses its significance. The larger historical perspective reveals just how extraordinary this turning point truly is. Neptune and Pluto began their current cycle when they met in conjunction within Gemini during the year 1891. That conjunction acted like a seed planted deep within collective history. From that beginning emerged many of the defining breakthroughs that shake the modern world. The early development of aviation, the spread of electricity, the rise of the automobile, the revolutionary discoveries of quantum physics, the emergence of psychoanalysis, the expansion of feminism, and much of the technological and philosophical foundation that would define the 20th century all took root during that era. Since that original conjunction, these two distant planets have continued their slow separation across the zodiac, unfolding the potential planted at that initial meeting. Whenever they have reached an exact sextile during that long journey, humanity has entered another profound stage of development, revealing that these alignments are not isolated moments, but milestones that accompany sweeping evolutionary leaps across both the collective world and the deeply personal paths each individual is living. What makes this moment so extraordinary is not simply that another exact sextile has arrived, but that it represents the closing movement of a process that has unfolded across generations. The first exact phase during the 1950s coincided with an era of rebuilding after war, the emergence of television as a dominant force in everyday life, and the early momentum of the civil rights movement. The next exact phase, during the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, arrived alongside the rise of the personal computer, the expansion of environmental awareness into mainstream culture, and an extraordinary wave of spiritual exploration that encouraged people to question reality in ways previous generations rarely had. Now we have entered the final sequence. The exact Neptune and Pluto sextile on July 25th marks the opening activation of the last series of sextiles that will continue through the year 2032. Beyond that point, the relationship between these planets gradually advances toward their square in the 1960s, carrying an entirely different quality of energy and an entirely different evolutionary purpose. That realization changes everything because it means this period is not another chapter inserted somewhere in the middle of the story. It is the culmination window, The seed first planted when Neptune and Pluto came together in Gemini during the year 1891 is reaching the stage where its deepest lessons can finally be integrated. The more I reflected on that perspective, the more impossible it became to view current events as isolated developments. The rapid expansion of artificial intelligence, the emergence of decentralized finance, the gradual weakening of long-established institutional systems, and the increasingly visible fusion of spirituality with activism no longer appear disconnected. Instead, they resemble different expressions of the same evolutionary current moving through humanity all at once. It feels as though an entire century of growth is being asked to mature, and whether you recognize it consciously or not, your own life is inseparably connected to that larger unfolding. Your personal choices are not happening outside this transformation. They are woven directly into its fabric. That brings us to what feels like the most intimate dimension of this alignment. Because while the Neptune and Pluto sextile is undeniably a collective event, its influence is also deeply personal. Rather than operating only on the level of history or society, this alignment functions with remarkable precision inside the individual psyche. It has a way of peeling away inherited conditioning, dissolving identities that were built to gain approval rather than express truth, and exposing aspects of your path that have remained hidden, sometimes because circumstances concealed them, and sometimes because you were not yet prepared to recognize them. Among everything this portal appears to illuminate, there are three revelations that stand out with particular clarity. And the first may challenge you more than you expect, while ultimately becoming one of the greatest sources of freedom you have ever experienced. Since Pluto entered Aquarius during the year 2024, its work has centered on exposing every place where personal power has quietly been surrendered in exchange for acceptance. It reveals the moments when you silenced your authentic perspective to avoid rejection. It uncovers every community where you learned to shrink yourself in order to fit comfortably inside existing expectations. It highlights every social environment where you gradually diluted your individuality because standing apart seemed too uncertain or too costly. Pluto does not allow those compromises to remain hidden. It brings them unmistakably into awareness, and its process is rarely gentle because genuine transformation seldom is. Yet this is exactly where Neptune in Aries introduces a profoundly different dimension. Neptune begins revealing that the qualities you once viewed as inconvenient, the opinions that never fully aligned with the crowd, the characteristics that made you feel different from everyone around you, are not flaws waiting to be corrected. They may in fact represent the unique contribution you were always meant to offer. This portal seems to whisper a truth that many people spend years trying to discover. Authentic belonging cannot be created by becoming more like everyone else. It emerges when you are willing to stand fully inside your own identity without apology, and allow the people who truly resonate with that authenticity to find you because of who you genuinely are, rather than because of a carefully maintained version of yourself. If recent weeks have left you feeling strangely disconnected from friendships that once felt effortless, from communities that previously seemed comforting, or from online spaces that once reflected your identity, do not rush to interpret that experience as failure or isolation. It does not necessarily mean you are withdrawing from people or becoming unnecessarily difficult. It may simply indicate that your inner landscape has begun shifting beyond environments built upon familiarity, convenience, or fear. The portal appears to be clearing away relationships sustained primarily by habit, while quietly creating room for connections rooted in genuine alignment. Within that process, another layer of destiny begins to emerge. It resembles what could best be described as decentralized leadership. This form of leadership has little to do with titles, public recognition, or gathering followers around a single voice. Instead, it develops through the quiet influence of someone who consistently embodies authenticity, your distinctive perspective, your individual gifts, and your willingness to remain true to yourself become forces that naturally affect every conversation, every relationship, and every life you encounter. Influence begins flowing outward without demanding attention. Many of you may be approaching that role now, even if it bears little resemblance to the future you once imagined for yourself. The second revelation moves even deeper because it challenges dreams that may have shaped your life for years. This realization can feel uncomfortable precisely because it asks you to release goals that seemed deeply personal. Yet sometimes the hardest truth is recognizing that the destination you pursued with complete sincerity was never actually your own. Neptune spent 14 years traveling through Pisces from the year 2011 until the year 2025. During that remarkable period, spirituality reached an unprecedented level of public visibility, inspiring countless people to explore intuition, healing, consciousness, and inner transformation. That expansion brought extraordinary opportunities for awakening, yet it also carried an unavoidable side effect. Neptune in Pisces surrounded collective consciousness with a powerful mist. Within that atmosphere, many people unknowingly absorbed ambitions, visions, and ideals that appeared intensely personal, while actually reflecting broader cultural currents. Dreams borrowed from collective imagination often disguise themselves as authentic purpose, making it increasingly difficult to distinguish between what genuinely belonged to the soul and what had simply been inherited from the emotional atmosphere of the times. Sometimes the hardest awakening is realizing that what once inspired you was never truly aligned with your soul. Many of us unconsciously confused what attracted widespread attention with what carried genuine meaning. We assumed that if a dream was admired by enough people, it must also be the dream we were destined to pursue. Yet the sky is now asking a far more honest question. Neptune has entered Aries, and after stationing retrograde on July 7th, it began reversing through the inner landscape of our lives with remarkable precision. Instead of creating new fantasies, that retrograde has been quietly removing them, layer by layer, exposing everything that had been covering your authentic direction. Now, as Neptune forms its exact sextile with Pluto today, the process becomes dramatically more focused. It is as though a beam of light suddenly passes through every illusion you have been carrying. Pluto has never been interested in comforting stories or convenient explanations. Its nature is to uncover what has been buried beneath years of conditioning. It digs relentlessly until only what is undeniably real remains. When Neptune's vision meets Pluto's uncompromising truth at this exact degree, the result resembles a profound examination of every ambition, every expectation, and every destination you have believed belonged to you. That experience can feel unsettling because clarity often arrives by dismantling certainty before replacing it with something deeper. You may suddenly recognize that a goal you invested years pursuing was fueled less by your authentic desires and more by a longing to be accepted. Perhaps your motivation was quietly shaped by an old wound that convinced you achievement would finally earn love. Or perhaps you adopted someone else's definition of success so gradually that it eventually felt like your own. Discovering that truth is not evidence that you have failed. It is evidence that you are finally seeing clearly. I cannot emphasize enough how valuable that kind of clarity becomes during an alignment like this. Even when it arrives wrapped in disappointment, it is still one of the greatest gifts available because it removes the weight of living someone else's story. When the illusion finally dissolves, what remains is not emptiness. What remains is the dream that never required applause to be meaningful. It is the calling that feels true even when nobody else understands it. It is the direction that may demand greater courage, greater patience, and greater faith. It may never appear impressive according to conventional standards, yet it carries something far more important. It belongs entirely to you. It reflects your own soul instead of borrowed expectations. If something you have been chasing suddenly begins to feel strangely empty, or if a vision that once energized you no longer holds the same emotional power, resist the temptation to interpret that shift as defeat. It may feel like something precious is slipping away, but I believe something far more significant is happening. The portal is performing exactly the work it was meant to perform. It is cleaning the window through which you view your future, so that for the first time you can recognize the path that has quietly been waiting beneath every distraction. That brings us to what may be the most transformative revelation of all, because it changes not only how you understand yourself, but also how you understand spirituality itself. For many years, spirituality has often been associated with gentleness, surrender, stillness, meditation, waiting patiently for signs, and trusting that everything will eventually unfold if your mindset remains positive. There is genuine wisdom within those practices, and they continue to hold tremendous value. Yet this portal appears to reveal that they are no longer the complete picture for the era now unfolding. Pluto, moving through Aquarius, is forcing humanity to confront realities that cannot be ignored. It directs our attention toward the ethical questions surrounding artificial intelligence, the widening gap created by wealth inequality, the accelerating challenges of environmental degradation, and the concentration of influence into fewer and fewer centers of power. These are not issues that disappear simply because we cultivate inner peace. They require conscious participation as well. I believe the Neptune and Pluto sextile is awakening something inside countless people that refuses to turn away from these realities any longer. Neptune, traveling through Aries, introduces a different expression of spiritual consciousness, one that could be described as the awakening of the spiritual warrior. This image has nothing to do with hostility or aggression. Instead, it reflects compassion that has become active rather than passive. It represents the understanding that genuine empathy sometimes requires strong boundaries. It requires the willingness to defend what is right. It requires the courage to challenge systems, behaviors, and patterns that create unnecessary suffering, even when doing so feels uncomfortable or demands personal sacrifice. That realization carries profound implications for your own destiny, because many people have quietly suppressed the part of themselves that longs to stand wholeheartedly for something meaningful. Not to fight for the sake of conflict, but to devote their entire being to a purpose that reflects their deepest values. Perhaps you were taught that such determination was somehow incompatible with spiritual growth. Perhaps you heard that anger automatically represented lower consciousness, that the desire for change reflected unhealthy attachment, or that the highest path was simply to protect your own inner peace while remaining detached from the world's struggles. Those ideas developed for understandable reasons, yet this portal appears to offer another perspective. It suggests that your inner peace and the healing of the collective are deeply interconnected rather than separate pursuits. It reminds you that acting with integrity, speaking when silence enables harm, and helping create healthier systems can themselves become sacred spiritual practices. The individual who rises to defend truth, who uses their voice responsibly, and who contributes to building something more compassionate, participates in work every bit as meaningful as the individual who sits quietly in meditation. Both expressions arise from the same spiritual source when guided by wisdom rather than ego. If you have noticed an unfamiliar fire growing within you during recent weeks, a feeling that resembles readiness far more than anxiety, do not assume it needs to be extinguished. That quiet intensity may not be a problem requiring correction. It may be the unmistakable sign that a deeper dimension of your spiritual identity is beginning to awaken. It is a shift that can feel both humbling and exhilarating because it asks you to move beyond observation and into conscious participation. Many people are sensing this same internal transformation, and it has the unmistakable quality of standing at the threshold of an entirely different way of living. As powerful as these revelations already are, they become even more meaningful when viewed alongside the surrounding transits, because the remarkable precision with which these celestial events are unfolding adds another layer of significance to everything this portal is bringing into focus. And understanding that broader timing helps explain why this moment feels unlike anything that has come before. One of the reasons this portal carries so much weight is because it does not exist in isolation. Every major transit surrounding it appears to prepare the ground for what is unfolding now, almost as though each planetary movement has been carefully arranged to support the next stage of the journey. Mercury, stationed direct yesterday on July 23rd, after remaining retrograde since the closing days of June. During that retrograde, many people found themselves revisiting emotional territory they believed had already been left behind. Old memories resurfaced without warning. Family dynamics that had never been completely resolved demanded attention once again. Long-buried subconscious patterns slowly emerged into awareness, asking to be acknowledged instead of ignored. It was not an easy process, and for many it felt emotionally exhausting, but looking back it becomes easier to understand its purpose. Rather than creating confusion for its own sake, the retrograde appears to have been clearing accumulated mental and emotional clutter. It was making room. It was removing distractions, outdated narratives, and unresolved emotional residue, so that when this Neptune and Pluto portal reached its exact activation, you would possess the clarity necessary to recognize what it was revealing. Without that preparation, the deeper messages of this alignment might easily have been overlooked beneath the noise of unresolved emotions. Instead, the retrograde quietly prepared the inner landscape, so the truth now emerging would have somewhere to land. The remarkable precision of the timing becomes even more striking when we look at what follows immediately afterward. On July the 26th, less than 2 days after the exact Neptune and Pluto sextile, Saturn stations retrograde. Saturn has always represented structure, responsibility, discipline, and the willingness to transform insight into lasting reality. Its retrograde introduces a completely different stage of the process. If the portal delivers revelation, Saturn asks what you intend to do with it. It is almost like a careful inspection that examines the integrity of everything you claim to have learned. It asks whether the awakening you have experienced will become the foundation for meaningful action, or whether it will simply remain another inspiring realization that gradually fades as everyday life resumes. That question matters because the nature of a sextile is fundamentally different from many other planetary aspects. It does not impose change upon you without your participation. Instead, it presents possibility. It unlocks opportunity. It creates favorable conditions through which growth can occur, yet the decision to move forward always remains yours. The support exists. The vision becomes available. The energetic current begins flowing. Even so, none of it replaces personal choice. You still have to step through the doorway that has been opened before you. The portal invites. It never forces. Then another powerful turning point arrives on July 29th, with the full moon in Aquarius, conjunct Pluto, while standing opposite the Sun and Jupiter in Leo. This lunation has the potential to carry everything revealed during the portal out of the invisible inner world and into visible external experience. Insights that first appeared quietly within your thoughts and emotions may begin expressing themselves through relationships, professional decisions, public roles, and the way you interact with the world around you. What has been transforming privately begins seeking expression publicly. That transition can naturally feel vulnerable, because internal change is often easier to manage than allowing others to witness its external consequences. Yet perhaps that vulnerability is precisely what completes the process. Inner transformation eventually asks to become lived experience, rather than remaining only personal understanding. As these energies continue unfolding, you may already be noticing subtle signs within yourself, even if you have not connected them to this broader pattern. Perhaps you felt an unexpected distance developing between yourself and certain people or environments that once felt completely comfortable. Nothing dramatic may have occurred. There may have been no conflict or obvious disagreement. Instead, there is simply a quiet awareness that something no longer resonates the way it once did. It is almost as though your inner compass has begun redirecting itself before your conscious mind fully understands why. Maybe you have also experienced moments of astonishing clarity regarding an important relationship, your career, or a long-held belief, where something that seemed obvious for years suddenly appears entirely different. Sometimes a single realization has the power to reorganize years of assumptions within seconds. You may also recognize another feeling that has become increasingly difficult to ignore, a persistent longing to devote yourself to something meaningful, even though you cannot yet fully define what that purpose will become. It resembles the sensation of standing before an unopened door, while somehow knowing that your future exists on the other side. Alongside all of this, you may have discovered yourself feeling emotionally more sensitive than usual, not because you are falling apart, but because superficial experiences no longer satisfy you in the way they once did. Conversations lacking authenticity may leave you feeling empty. Familiar routines may suddenly feel incomplete. Something deeper is asking for your attention, and ordinary distractions seem less capable of silencing it. If these experiences sound familiar, do not immediately conclude that something has gone wrong within you. It may simply mean that your inner awareness has already begun responding to the shift represented by this portal. Your mind, emotions, and intuition may be adjusting themselves in preparation for what is continuing to unfold. That does not mean every difficult feeling this week can definitively be attributed to Neptune and Pluto. No one can honestly make that claim with certainty. Even so, the remarkable timing, together with the growing number of people describing strikingly similar internal experiences, suggests that something broader may indeed be influencing the collective emotional landscape. Perhaps the most important truth to remember is that this moment represents a beginning rather than a conclusion. The exact Neptune and Pluto sextile on July 25th is not the destination. It is the opening signal that initiates a much longer unfolding. Between now and the year 2032, these planets will perfect 13 additional exact sextiles. That means the doorway opening today remains active throughout the next 6 years, gradually revealing its full significance over time. You are not expected to understand every lesson immediately. If perfect clarity about your life purpose does not arrive all at once, that does not mean the opportunity has passed you by. Some individuals will experience an unmistakable shift almost instantly. They may recognize a new direction without hesitation, make decisive choices, or leave behind chapters that no longer belong in their future. Others will discover that the transformation unfolds patiently through weeks, months, and years as scattered pieces slowly connect into a coherent picture. Neither experience is more valid than the other because both reflect the same process, expressing itself through different lives. The essential invitation is simply to remain awake while it happens. Pay attention when something inside you begins stirring. Resist dismissing quiet inner nudges as meaningless. If you feel called to release what no longer reflects who you are, allow yourself to consider that possibility honestly. If you sense the impulse to move towards something unfamiliar, or to speak your truth despite uncertainty, recognize that those moments may carry more significance than they first appear to hold. This alignment is not encouraging passive waiting. It is not asking you to postpone your life until another sign appears or someone else provides permission. Instead, it quietly suggests that perhaps you are being invited to become the very answer you have spent so much time hoping would arrive from somewhere outside yourself. That realization can feel overwhelming because it carries real responsibility, yet it is equally filled with extraordinary possibility. Opportunities of this magnitude are exceptionally rare. Very few generations witness alignments that unfold only once across many centuries with such remarkable precision. If the universe is presenting a window like this, the deeper question may not be whether it is real, but how you choose to respond while it remains open. You are living inside that window now, and perhaps you are already far more prepared than you have given yourself permission to believe. Before we close, I simply want to thank you for sharing this journey with me. If this conversation has spoken to something within you, and you would like to continue exploring these extraordinary cosmic moments together, I would truly appreciate your support by subscribing to the channel. It makes a greater difference than you might imagine. I would also love to hear your experience in the comments, because every story adds another piece to the larger picture we are all witnessing together. Tell me what has been changing in your life throughout this month. What no longer feels aligned? What unexpected realization has begun emerging? What new direction is slowly becoming visible? I take the time to read every comment because I genuinely believe we are navigating this remarkable chapter side by side. Be kind to yourself as these energies continue unfolding, and I look forward to sharing the next part of this journey with you very soon.